back. This is episode number 8.
Episode 8. Now, where are we located today,
We
sir?
are located in the historic Marine Corps Museum aboard Parris Island, South Carolina.
How exciting. What a great place with obviously a lot of history, a lot of Marine Corps history, but more importantly, a lot of warrior history. And I think one of the common things you see here is this concept of resilience and never giving up and great stories about that. So what are we going to talk about today for this show?
Today we're going to talk about overcoming obstacles.
Overcoming obstacles. I think if there's one common thread all warriors have, it is bumps along the road in that journey. And you know, they always, Mike Tyson, the great philosopher, once said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk through a couple examples of overcoming obstacles, both in the military and in entrepreneurship. And I know we've got some real world examples, but before we get into that, kind of take me through the training that warriors have to go through to get ready to overcome those obstacles.
Well, here aboard Parris Island, there are 3 phases of training, and I'm not the recruit training regiment commanding officer. Probably the commanding officer over there can give you the in the trenches details, but at a cursory view, first phase is stripping off being a civilian. That includes shaving your head and getting all the gear and equipment to go into training. Young ladies don't shave their heads, of course, but they have to learn how to have their hair managed appropriately to go through training. So in that first phase, you're learning the rules and regulations, you're learning how to march, you're learning how to eat properly, you're learning how to sound off with a voice that can be heard in combat. In the second phase, is more indoctrination, much more physical training, and transitioning out to the rifle range, which is the third phase. You go to the rifle range, learn weapons handling, and then the culmination of all that is the Crucible, where all the training you've learned in the previous 11 weeks is tested in that 12th week of training. Once you survive the Crucible, march back from the weapons field training battalion area and go over to the parade deck here aboard Parris Island. You receive that Eagle Globe and Anchor in your hand, and you are at that time considered, or you've shaking off everything as a recruit, and you're now a United States Marine.
So I think it's interesting when we look at that concept specific to the Marine Corps, because there isn't a clean process of becoming an entrepreneur, kind of raising through the ranks as a civilian. You kind of almost have to find your way. And I think one of the beauties of the military is it's regimented, and there's bureaucracy, and there's a ton of information that went into develop that. But when you get out in the real world, there's none of that.
Okay.
And that's one of the challenges I think that you see as a warrior is how are you going to develop your own training schedule? How are you going to teach yourself? And one of the things I always tell a lot of college classes when I'm out there talking, and there's actually classes now, you could actually get a degree in entrepreneurship. The worst thing you can do as an entrepreneur is graduate from college or high school and go right into entrepreneurship, because you haven't had a chance to go through what you just talked about in recruit training. And what I tell people is get out, go work for a really large company. And
Why a large company?
This is the reason why. There's a lot more resources at the large companies. They have additional training, a lot of leadership development, and soak up as much as that. What I did by making my journey through different companies, starting in sales, because I believe everything in business is down to sales. You've got to sell your employees why they should work for you. You've got to sell to customers why they should buy from you, not somebody else. You got to sell to vendors why they should take the risk of you becoming their customer, maybe paying them, maybe not paying them. Are they going to tool and change their tooling up to meet your product that may help cause them to lose more profitable business somewhere else? And you've got to be able to go through all those type of steps there. And so what I did is, as I learned sales, I then learned about marketing, and then I eventually went into big corporate America, Eli Lilly, and I started taking all their leadership development courses, everything from Six Sigma to critical conversation skills, John Maxwell, lean manufacturing, and I was able to pull out together, because if you just start right off into entrepreneurship and your journey starts without having that foundation that you just talked about, it's really difficult to kind of learn that on the job.
Okay.
There's a lot of obstacles, and the smaller you are, the more, not necessarily there's more obstacles, but it's harder to overcome those obstacles because you don't have those tools like you have with some of those larger companies.
Fair enough. Well, some of the obstacles that Parris Island experienced the main one was during COVID-19, during the pandemic. So here aboard Parris Island, the entry-level pipeline training never stopped. When the first cases of COVID sprung up, I was not aboard Parris Island, I was still at the Pentagon. But when I reported in and took command of Headquarters and Service Battalion, the quarantine area moved from Weapons Field Training Battalion area where they had a tent city. So there were 25-person tents, and all the poolies were...
What is a poolie?
Now you're a poolie before you become a recruit. So in the recruiting arena, as the recruiters are out there in the trenches doing the hard job of identifying the young men and young women who want to be Marines, once they enter or sign the document and raise their hand and say the oath, they become a poolee. They can train together, they can get classes, they can prepare to come here to Parris Island.
Okay.
But during the pandemic...
Well, let's pause for a second there. You had your COVID handbook, right? That you could just go through that handbook and read everything you're supposed to do?
It was still being constructed.
Oh, okay.
So COVID was so brand new, we were still reacting to what this COVID thing is.
So we're literally building the ship while it's on the water.
Absolutely.
Is what you're telling me, sir.
Absolutely. So we're learning as we go and ensuring what does success look like, successfully get poolies here so they can step on the yellow footprints and officially begin their journey in recruit training regiment.
So if you don't mind, let's back up a little because I really want to unpack this. I think there's a lot of stuff here. Let's talk about what training you had and experiences you had to prepare for this obstacle. Now, we didn't know what that obstacle was going to be 10 years ago, but I imagine there's a couple tools and things that you weren't, as you were learning and raising through the ranks on how to overcome obstacles. What are some of those basic foundations that you think were really important to help you when you had to technically write this training manual while we're in the middle of a global pandemic?
So Zach, I think fundamentally, some of the things that you and I have talked about before is being brilliant in the basics. And one of those basics leading up to the pandemic was, know yourself and seek self-improvement, and then employ your Marines as a team. Work towards their strengths. So with no handbook being developed for COVID-19, we were kind of depending on our foundation, on our roots, be they at Parris Island, San Diego, or Officer Candidate School. And what do we know? What do we understand? What is the mission? The mission is to make Marines. How do we protect that mission? Using all the tools in our leadership toolbox to attack COVID-19. So that's what got us here.
So let's break down some of those tools, sir. What are the top 2 or 3 tools you had to pull out of your commander's little toolbox that you had there to kind of kick things off as we started to realize this wasn't going to be a week or 2 long process? And
that's a great question, Zach. Coming into command, my predecessor had everything in place. And one of the tools was, for me, don't go in and change anything immediately. Observe and assess what was going on already. And most of my observations took place at the Citadel. The other thing that I did...
Why the Citadel?
Because things started here.
Okay.
And
so we had Tent City
here. And we realized here aboard Parris Island, one infected poolie became 25 in a tent. And that could significantly affect or impact the recruit training pipeline. So, because Citadel is 45 miles north, they opened their arms and let us use the entire campus to put poolies in smaller batches, 2 to 4 person rooms in the structures there aboard the Citadel.
And give me a little background on the Citadel for our listeners who don't know what the Citadel is.
The College of the South, the Military College of the South.
Gotcha.
I'm not a Citadel graduate. But
it's always easy to tell a Citadel graduate because they'll tell you the first thing they say is on Citadel, and then they'll give you the little ring, Wonder Twin Powers activated and knock those rings.
So not a Citadel graduate, but beautiful campus. And we went aboard that campus and we had the whole place to ourselves. And we used the 2 to 4 person rooms. So if a poolie was infected, you wouldn't infect 25, you'd infect 1 to 3. So that helped preserve the entry training level pipeline. Unfortunately, the Citadel students were returning.
So that's another obstacle we got to conquer now.
And the last obstacle was Mother Nature's fault. Hurricane season.
Oh, wow.
So the nightmare scenario, if all things converge, is that I have 1,100 poolies plus my 300 staff that have to be evacuated from the Citadel, and we have to evacuate Parris Island. That's the nightmare scenario. So the obstacle was, how do we continue preserving and maintaining the pipeline and get out of the path of Hurricane Alley?
So as we say in the Marine Corps, Semper Gumby. What does Semper Gumby mean?
Always flexible.
Always flexible.
So we had to pivot, and that pivot took us inland, and that inland location was in Atlanta. Much farther distance from Parris Island, but a facility where we could isolate and continue providing the 14 days of isolation for police before they report here to Parris Island. And that was a challenge because of the logistics trail from Parris Island to Atlanta. If a pulley was there and they didn't have running shoes, or appropriate size physical training gear, we would have to get that to them. And that's a 5 to 7 hour trip depending on traffic. But we gutted through it and maintained. And we had to, once again, another obstacle was that contract ended and we had to come back to the East Coast. In doing that, we shifted successfully from Atlanta to Jacksonville, Florida. Another obstacle popped up. I had COVID positive poolies in Atlanta, clean poolies in Atlanta, and I had to transport them to Jacksonville, Florida. Additionally, once you are COVID positive, a commercial bus cannot transport those poolies.
Wow.
So I had to find COVID positive recovered drivers and assistant drivers to man my 80 infected poolies that had to come to quarantine in Jacksonville. So a lot of moving pieces, a lot of communication, and once again, being brilliant in the basics. What do I know? Who else needs to know, and have I told them? That was the mantra that I instilled in task force commitment throughout this endeavor.
Well, sir, it's pretty remarkable what you did. You never took a knee during the whole entire time. Continue to maintain that mission to our country of providing, our fleet Marine force and reserve forces with new Marines coming in there, which is, critical. Great job in doing that. I love hearing about the flexibility, improvisation. It sounds like, again, you were building that manual as things are going on, and I think a lot of those similarities happen in entrepreneurship. There is no manual for entrepreneurship. Yeah, there's a little stuff here and there, talks about how to put together a financial performance, how to build a business plan, but at the end of the day, it's very unique. And another a great quote is, all battle plans, no battle plan survives the first shot downrange. We got a plan, we got to put it out there, but that flexibility, that creativity, and then you also mentioned teamwork, putting your team in action, because I'm sure that would have been just too much for one or two people to handle themselves.
Absolutely. It was completely a team effort, and we were only as strong as our weakest link. And our weakest link was distance, the tyranny of distance throughout. That's why that continual communication was key. But Zach, I think you had a similar experience in your own personal life.
Yeah, so with my business, our business was selling safety products. Our two main customers were commercial real estate, large Class A office buildings, and then also major retailers. Actually, major retailers being customers. As soon as the pandemic started, they obviously shut down our access to these different types of stores that are out there. And in addition to that, most of these commercial office buildings weren't allowing us to come in. So here we are with tremendous growth, tremendous infrastructure, and everything was based off of these big sheets of plexiglass, 1/4-inch thick plexiglass. Now what we would do is we put them through a milling type machine that would cut out a square that looked similar to a exit sign. Okay. Or similar to a license plate. So one of our great partners, Home Depot, approached us and said, look, if you have any access to change your tooling and get a larger size piece, we feel there's a big need for these barriers. Now, we were able to, like you, be flexible and creative. We went down immediately within a matter of a couple hours, because I think that's the other thing is that whole concept we talked about earlier, failing forward.
Okay.
Rather than sitting back and analyzing it and letting weeks and weeks go by, that could have really hurt us, because once somebody buys a product, they tend to stick with that same brand. Actually, there's studies that show that you have to spend 5x amount of money to unseat a brand that's being used. So if you're a Crest user and we want to switch you to Colgate, Colgate's going to have to spend 5 times the amount of money to get you to start switching over. So if I lost those first customers, it would be much, much harder for me to be able to bring them back. So what we're able to do is we're able to get these sheets of plexiglass cut to different sizes. We're able to quickly work with the Home Depot procurement group, being that it is an emergency, we had a little more flexibility, as I'm sure you had also. We all know we're in an emergency. And then from there, we were able to start making plexiglass barriers, and we ended up becoming Home Depot's top producer of plexiglass barriers during the COVID time period because we overcame that obstacle. Now, as Marines, as warriors, we always say mission accomplished first. You're going to hear this over and over again. It is so unbelievably true as an entrepreneur also. Mission accomplished has to take over everything. You had a mission. Nobody cared about troop welfare until the mission was taken care of. You had to accomplish that. I had to accomplish that. And I think that's the real difference between warriors that succeed through their crucible and those that don't, is those that don't succeed, they can't get outside of that box.
Okay.
You have to be able to get outside that box, be flexible, and I had a great team. I never would have been able to source the material. I never would have been able to manufacture it had I not had a team that I had trained and put together a long time prior, as I'm sure you did also.
Absolutely. And one thing that was consistent throughout was the flexibility and not being married to a plan. Flexibility was built in because there was no script, no book I could go to. We were doing hot washes or after action reports and briefs with every move. And it was the Marine Forces Reserve, they carried a bulk of that operation throughout. Without the reserves, we couldn't accomplish the mission. The active component has a mission to do, but when we team with and combine the resources with the reserves, it was an unstoppable force during COVID-19.
I would like also to bring up, I think, a very important thing, and that is diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of every aspect, because what happens if we don't have that diversity, we're going to look at that problem and we're all going to have eyes coming from the same background, looking at solving that exact same way. When you have a diverse group that gives you that flexibility, you can really start to pull out different types of ideas.
Without
there.
question.
And in our case, our diversity was our supply chain and finding different ways to source that material, different ways to manufacture that really helped out. Would you say diversity helped you along your way? I'm sure there were some cultural issues you maybe experienced with being in isolation like that for such a long time period.
There were, diversity contributed to the fight because reservists brought in a business mentality. When you wear the Marine Corps uniform as an active component Marine, there's certain battle rhythms, certain things you do day on, continuously. As a reservist, they're used to going, 1 weekend a month for the year, 12 times a year. They brought in a business perspective or a business lens on problem solving, especially when it came to logistics, especially when it came to working with the Navy, because the COVID-19 study was being done as well, where police could volunteer, say, okay, swab me, do the test on me if I'm negative or positive, and the Navy was looking at how COVID-19 was affecting entry-level troops. They did their training here, go to the fleet. Phase 2 kicked off and the Navy was tracking, okay, where are these Marines now? How is their health? How are they standing up? Did the stress of boot camp impact the way COVID-19 was acting in their bodies? Completely fascinating. And the Navy was teaming with Boston Medical, and they were going to see, where do we go from here? What's the next step? Because COVID is so new, they too, on the medical side, they're building as they go. So that diversity of thought, looking at the problem, was extremely beneficial to task force commitment.
And if we look at the warrior framework and that warrior journey, it starts with that adversity, that training, that experience that you have. And the more challenge that you have, the better that's preparing you for the next challenge. If tomorrow Cat 5 came here and literally wiped out Parris Island, do you feel you and your team would be better equipped to handle those alternative plans now because you've gone through this pandemic and you've experienced that?
And I would say without question. And I say that, Zach, because during the pandemic, during the heat of it, normally Headquarters and Service Battalion would have the mission of evacuating from here to Albany, Georgia. Our boss, Brigadier General Julie Nethercott, she said, okay, so you have H&S Headquarters and Service Battalion and Task Force Commitment, that's plenty for now. We'll give the evacuation mission to Weapons and Field Training Battalion. So they had that mission. Once Task Force Commitment was complete, I figured, hey, hoorah, he can keep that mission and I can just relax for a little while. That's a big negative. So if a Cat 5 came through and this place got wiped out, we would need somewhere else to go to continue the mission. So you're now Task Force Fort Knox. So I had to take a breath and go do a reconnaissance of Fort Knox and see huge Army facility. They're no longer doing boot camp, Army boot camp there. They have enough space for us to, if a Category 4 or 5 came through here and Parris Island was inoperable for 6 months to a year, we would take up residence at Fort Knox.
Gotcha. And I think that same similar thing happened with me. Prior to COVID, we were just a company focused on photoluminescent safety. And I was very rigid with our employees that we're not looking at anything else other than photoluminescent safety. When I was forced to have to go outside of my comfort zone and get into safety and not photoluminescent safety because of the pandemic, that allowed us to be more flexible. And now what we are finding is we've got a whole series of a portfolio of different products now that we're working with Home Depot and a lot of our other distributors that are out there, because we learned what it was like to immediately come up with new training material, marketing materials. How are we going to put together a system where we can easily get these SKUs entered into the systems from both the back office end of how we communicate with the inventory supply chain model, and then also how do we communicate it to the sales team and explain that. And so now, as a result of that challenge, we were able to exceed. And I think at the end of the day, a warrior embraces obstacle. A warrior embraces challenges, because that's going to get you outside of your comfort zone. That's going to help you grow. And all those things we've talked about in previous episodes about having the courage to be okay with being uncomfortable, not having something that you truly know, really does make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Well, sir, as we always finish up, we like to dedicate these episodes to somebody. What's interesting is right behind me is a wall that talks about all the celebrities and professional athletes that wore the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And would you have any of those specifically you'd like to go ahead and dedicate this show to?
One that stands out, who's on the wall back there, that Zach mentioned, is Jose Clemente, professional baseball player, trained here aboard Parris Island successfully, and the obstacles he overcame, battling racism, battling language barriers, battling being a native of Puerto Rico. He kept rowing through all of that. And we want to dedicate this episode to him, because when he died, he was providing relief. He was providing assistance to those in need when his aircraft crashed. So we'd like to dedicate this episode to Jose Clemente.
Excellent. And we'll finish as we always do with the knife hand and
Semper Fidelis.